The Nintendo 64 was an amazing console. It had it all! Big successful Mario game? Check. Real shooters? Check. Sports games, racing games, and party games? Check, check, triple check. What about a Zelda game? How about 2? Just look at all these good games! But for the longest while, it didn't have any turn-based RPGs. And when it did, it was really, really bad. And that's kind of absurd, don't you think? How many amazing RPGs are there on basically every console? Hell, how many amazing RPGs are there on the Super Nintendo, the console that came just before this? And the Nintendo 64 didn't have a single one. Until it did. 2001 rolls around, enter Paper Mario. The second Mario RPG to be made, and one of my favorite games of all time. Period. For me, this was the first time that the Mushroom Kingdom was brought to life. Toads and Koopas and Boos and Ninjas all had towns and cities that they lived in. Princess Peach actually addresses her subjects, and Mario has a house. Now, a lot of N64 games are kind of pointy by today's standard at best, and downright hideous at worst, but Paper Mario looks as fantastic now as it did on release, and that's largely due to the utterly adorable and endearing art direction. Even by Mario standards, this game is almost upsettingly charming. And not just visually, there's this biting wit and silliness to so much of the dialogue in this game. In most cases before this, Bowser was at least meant to be intimidating or cool, menacing even. And while he's still a formidable baddie in this, he rides the line between malevolent villain and complete goober in an almost magical balancing act. All of the Mario races? Species? Get a lot more fleshed out by having tons of them join your party. My favorite's Lady Bo because, look at her! And at the center of it all is Toad Town, a big, colorful, and exciting city at the heart of the Mushroom Kingdom. Today on Homeworlds, we're going to be looking at this place to see how Paper Mario measures up, hub-wise. Hubularly. Hubulistically? Toad Town is a well-grounded hub world. How well-grounded, I hear you asking? Well, to start, when the player boots up a new file, they are dropped into a cinematic where the Mario Brothers receive an invitation to a party that Peach is throwing, and we follow them as they walk from their house to hers through Toad Town. You have to wonder, why did they bother doing this instead of just cutting straight to the castle grounds? Well, first and foremost, this is just good pacing. Mario and Luigi have a small goal immediately set out ahead of them, and this gives the audience some time to digest that. But it also allows for some sense of space to be established. It certainly would be a creative cut to have the pair of plumbers walk out their door and into the castle, but it really wouldn't give you any idea of how far apart they actually live, or what's in between. As a bonus, we get teased a bit of this area that we're going to be back in later. What's that building with the spinning roof? Who are these guys in front of the stairs here? A lot of questions that we get answered later. After Bowser beats up Mario and kidnaps the princess and the rest of her entire castle... Jesus, settle down, man. It's gonna be a little while before we see old Toad Town again. In the interim, the player will learn of what Bowser actually did, get some basic battling tutorials, find some items, establish a long-term rival, meet their first partner, and beat the prologue boss. We then catch up a bit with what Bowser's next plans are before walking through a gate, and hey, we're back here again. I remember this screen. If I go down this pipe, I'm home! It's good to be home. By including these areas in the game before the player even begins their adventure, there's this sense of cozy nostalgia already in place for when they functionally arrive here for the first time. Now that we're here, let's see what we can go and where we can do. Aside from being a point of access to Mario's home, this first screen has a bunch of NPCs, where we can get a bit of that wit I alluded to earlier, as well as the House of Rusty, a bookworm who gives out random tips and tricks about the game, like enemies' weaknesses and overworld life hacks. Going left, as one does in a Mario game, we can finally get an answer to the age-old question, who are these guys standing in front of these stairs? Turns out that this is a dojo, and these are the pupils of the master. It will be open shortly, and something great about this is that you may choose to fight progressively more difficult enemies, starting with Chan, then Lee, then the master, and then you go Super Saiyan, and then Super Saiyan 2, and you can, with no stakes, challenge them whenever you want, and get supremely owned. It gives you this sense of weakness early on that pays off in an arc of sorts for the player themselves when they return and finally graduate from the dojo. In the next section of town can be found that weird spinning roof building, a post office, a bad shop, and a flower garden. Some other random details to note are that the eastern exit is being blocked by some greaser toads with some tood, and that the southern exit is blocked by fallen lumber knocked over when Bowser stole a whole castle! The player will soon find out that this spin roof house place is home to Merlin, a fortune teller who can be paid to give hints on where to go next. In-game hint systems are great, especially when they work without breaking the fourth wall. Magic certainly is a get-out-of-jail-free card, and works well to explain how this knowledge is accessible without disrupting immersion. So in short, the order of events to come is that Mario climbs a mountain, talks to the astral projections of some MacGuffins that he needs to save, and then goes back to town and is told to meet Merlin. The game then comically flagellates all RPGs by having Merlin talk on and on and on until Mario falls asleep and then skips the rest of the cinematic. Merlin then reveals that the punk-ass toads blocking the eastern exit to town are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the boss of the next chapter. After this, I won't be forgetting that Merlin exists anytime soon. I am extremely aware that this hint character exists. That's some smart design points earned for Paper Mario right there. Jumping ahead again, once Chapter 1 is complete, the southern parts of Toad Town are now available for exploration. And there is a lot here. It was absolutely the right call to not allow the player to venture down here on their first visit. Designers are always having to ask themselves how much information is the correct amount to give the player. Having to map out all the places and routes in the initial area in addition to following all the story beats and the new mechanics being tutorialized and just figuring out where to go is manageable. But learning about the cooking mechanic and adding 4 more zones to Toad Town and the entrance to Forever Forest and the Little Oinks and the sewers and the games room, it's just way too much. And that's not inherently a bad thing. There's plenty of games that get away with making all of the info available from the word go, and they just say, you deal with it. Or in even more harsh cases, they don't even bother to let you know that the info is there at all. Like I said last time about pillars, it's about what kind of experience you want to craft. Paper Mario is a comfortable, happy-go-lucky game, and it wants everyone who plays it to feel completely within their depth. It's not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be fun. So we're supposed to be heading south now, but before we do that, let's check out this flower garden that I just glossed over before. Min T asks us to keep an eye out for bulbs, who will give us seeds that we can plant in the garden to make it really pretty. Just a nice little extra thing that we can do in our adventure. Player-motivated actions go a long way all on their own. Allowing the audience to participate in things on their own terms lends a sense of authenticity to their actions that gives them personal value. This garden will look fab, and it will be because I chose to make it so. It's really smart then that one of the bulbs is not only in Toad Town, but just south of the garden. A small victory to get your foot in the door on this side quest makes it all the more tantalizing. Going all the way south, there's a hidden minigame room here that has exclusive membership. And right next to it is maybe the most adorable lottery ever conceived, where you pay money to get eggs that hatch into pigs. What? Just like real-life gachapon machines, there's a lot to collect, and even rare ones. They drop items when you walk into the pen, and the rarer the little oink, the better the items that they drop. Okay, so granted, these features aren't exclusive to Paper Mario in the slightest. Just about every JRPG under the sun has side games and the like, but the presentation of these things are very important. You don't just walk into a building and say, yes, I would like to play the money-making game and roll the dice and whoops, guess I lost it all. You hit a tree, go down a secret pipe, and then give a membership card that you got from a side quest that you did in another town that unlocks a fun little game to make some money. It's playful, it's toy-like. Mario's always been like this, and it's just a good time. To quote Ian Danskin in his video, It's Not Easy Being Blue, Mario lives in a world of jazzy music, polka dots, and inanimate objects with happy faces, and that's just fun. It was fun in 1985, it's fun today, and it was fun in 1932! So we finally made it through the Sea of Digressions to the train station. After clearing the tracks of some rubble, the train can take Mario to the second chapter. Note that for the first chapter, we just walked out of town. That happens twice out of the 8 chapters in this game. Paper Mario is crazy creative with how Toad Town acts as a hub. As we just saw, sometimes you ride a train, but sometimes you ride a whale, and sometimes you take a warp pipe or get beamed up, and, well, we'll get to the other ones in a sec. There's actually still more features to go over in Toad Town, namely cooking and the sewers. Again, I'm gonna hold off on cooking until we get to a later section. I promise it'll all come together, just bear with me. So, yeah, sewers. The sewers are a bonus level for Paper Mario, which adds shortcuts to the rest of the world. So I mentioned partners earlier on. These are your party members who fight alongside you in battle. They each have their own ability outside of battle to solve puzzles and overcome obstacles, too. Additionally, there are some power-ups for Mario's boots and hammer, which let him ground pound, get some extra height, and break harder blocks. All of these abilities come together to create a lot of interesting keys to various kinds of locks. You can't get into this room here, which has the first set of shortcuts, until you get the hammer upgrade in the second chapter, which is good because one of the places to which it gets you is a town in Chapter 2. But it's not just shortcuts in them that are sewers. There's badges, upgrades for your partners, hidden collectibles, a boot upgrade, and even a weird merchant guide. It really does feel like you got a whole bonus level down here. But do you know what's better than including a bonus level in the hub? So remember that side quest about the flower garden? Yeah, it's not so side. It's not even optional. The entrance to Chapter 6 is a door that appears in the archway at the center of the garden, and it will only appear once the player has filled each of the 4 flower patches, with the seed from the pink, yellow, blue, and green bubble. These little flower friends are found in Toad Town and in Chapters 2, 3, and 5, and are just barely off the critical path. You can definitely get to this part of the game without any seeds, but it's not likely. The game does a good job of making you feel like you just happened to stumble across the bubbles. That said, it's not a crazy notion to think that you might be missing a seed by the time that you get here, spurring you into a search around the world for the last one.
It's around the world.
It's, again, a really important balance to strike as a designer. And for most of this little mission, the player has no clue what their reward is going to be. I felt so gratified for signing myself up to this task and finding out that I unlocked a whole chapter. Something to keep in mind is that even though that this is ultimately something that is presented to the player as something that they may choose to opt into, come on, of course they're gonna do it. People play games to do things. Mark Rosewater, the lead designer of Magic the Gathering of 23 years, said in his 2016 GDC talk titled 20 Years, 20 Lessons, quote, "When players sit down to play a game, there's an implied promise from the game designer. The game designer says, if you do what the game tells you, it will be an enjoyable experience. This means that when a game says, want to collect some seeds for this garden, the implication is that doing so will be a good time. Now the critical part of this from the user experience side is that the player feels like they made a choice, and it led to fun. How smart of them. Not that the game designers rightfully expected the players to take the bait. And that's that. Unfortunately, this is as much as Chapter 6 is involved with Toad Town. Don't get me wrong, this is a damn good showing of clever design. It's a fun thing to do, and it results in a fun payoff that meshes the hub with the greater story of the game. Maybe, just maybe, it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity that this part of the game wasn't even more intertwined with Toad Town, having the player go back and forth between Toad Town and Flower Fields in order to progress the chapter. Well, it's not, because Chapter 4 did just that. Upon returning from the third chapter in Forever Forest, Mario finds Toad Town overrun by Shy Guys. They can be found disturbing the peace, dancing on people's beds, taking over shops, stealing a bunch of people's personal belongings. Even the town music has changed to something a bit more chaotic. Welcome to Chapter 4, Trials in the Toy Box. The premise is that these Shy Guys just showed up and nobody knows where they're coming from. Asking around town will yield some interesting results. The citizens of Toad Town will tell you which direction they saw them running from, meaning that the locals can be used as a dowsing rod of sorts. Over here? Warmer. How about over here? Looks like I overshot it. If you don't like talking to the NPCs, then why are you playing an RPG even? You can just follow the Shy Guys. They always run off in the direction of their secret base whenever they make off with something, or when you whack them with a hammer. Turns out that they're in an otherwise empty house that's been accessible for most of the game. But it's not that simple. You have to use your newest party member, Lady Bo, in order to turn invisible so that you can watch a Shy Guy reveal a hidden back panel behind which is, a box? Holy okay. From here on out, the Shy Guy's toy box continues to interact with Toad Town. There's a handful of stolen items to return that simply grant the player a collectible and return the service to use. I mean, how's a guy gonna sell badges without a calculator? Or a postmaster to hand out letters without his mailbag? Or a random nerd to give you advice without his dictionary? Really? You need to translate to do this? But there's also a lot of items to return that are critical to progress in this level. You start at Blue Station, which is missing its train, and head down a path ending in a chest containing a storeroom key to the nearby shop's back room. It contains, wouldn't you know it, a toy train that can be dropped into the toy box and ridden to the other zones of this level. Next we need to flip a rail switch to make it at a Pink Station, but the path is being blocked by a mega chonker in need of food. Unfortunately, resident chef extraordinaire Taste T has had her frying pan stolen by a Shy Guy and can't cook him anything. Luckily, it's nearby. We can get it, leave the toy box, and return to its rightful owner to receive a piece of cake. This'll coax that chufty lad out of the way and bestow upon the player a cookbook. I suppose now is the best time to dive into the cooking mechanic. The player can bring an item to Taste Tea and she'll cook it for you, transforming it into a new item. She always turns the items into a corresponding result, so Koopa leaves always yield Koopa tea and mushrooms always yield fried shrooms. You better write this down because the game ain't doing it for you. All in all, it's really simple and easy to understand. Item go in, new item come out. But sometimes it doesn't pan out. Oh! You really should only give her edible items unless you want to get a mistake, but hey, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. If you want to cook a POW block and mow down on that, that's up to you. You're just gross is all. So up until this point you could only give Tasty one item, but now with the cookbook, you can combine items! It is so much fun to experiment in this system. What happens if I mix some maple syrup in a super shroom? Or a fire flower in an egg? I could fool around in this system for hours and hours. I honestly wish there was like a menu where all the recipes you've discovered are cataloged, just so I could scratch that completionist itch and fill it all out. So, back to the toy box. There's one more area that Mario must bypass in order to reach the final boss and finish the chapter. Green Station. This follows the same formula as before. The player makes their way to the end of an adjacent hallway to a chest and gets a thing to take back to Toad Town in order to move forwards. This time it's Rusty's dictionary, which you return and get a star piece. What is that it? Yeah, actually it is. The dictionary doesn't help you move forward on its own. That said, there was a Shy Guy with a note in the same hallway. It's dropped when you beat the enemy, and when you take it to Rusty, a message can be translated to reveal a clue that explains how to get out of Green Station. And that's it! A cute little slice of content that incorporates the hub into an actual level of the game. You remember how I couldn't think of a hub that was a level in the same way as Banjo-Kazooie? Well, I found it. Toad Town is literally a major part of a chapter in Paper Mario, and it's fabulous. These NPCs aren't just window dressing to poke and prod at between the levels proper. They're intimately and essentially intertwined with the events required to succeed in the quest of the game. And for a game where you're expected, as a player, even on the smallest of levels, to roleplay, that's huge. As much as I loved Paper Mario throughout my childhood, it somehow exceeded my expectations still when it came to hub design. Any old RPG major town type place has shops and mini-games and what have you. But Paper Mario's designers looked at that and said, nah, not good enough. They knew that skinning each of these experiences to match what Mario is and has always been about was a point of polish worth having in every single aspect of the hub. They knew that this place would benefit from feeling connected in believable ways, and so they included a variety of context-driven means of travel to all the disparate zones of the world, and even took something that we already came to expect from Mario, warp pipes, and made a whole sewer system that used them as shortcuts to all these places to boot. But more than all that, intelligent systems knew that Toad Town could not just sit idly by as this monolithic point of return. They knew it wasn't even enough to have it change at various points in the game to reflect your progress as a player. It had to be an integral and involved location, involved with the plot of the game in major ways. It needed to not only be a level, but a main level, smack dab in the middle of the game. Great job. Thanks for watching, and thanks for joining me on a trip through one of the most beloved games of my childhood. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do the bell thingy for me. I'd really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you gave me a follow on Twitter, and pledged me $1 or $2 on Patreon. Patrons get to join the credits, see my work early, including my blooper reels, and top supporters get special recognition like this. Special thanks to Andrew Lumert, Brad Goodrich, Nikolai Carpathia, and 3-Eyed P. I also have a Curious Cat if you want to ask me your burning questions. It's great fun, so check it out. Stay tuned, friends.